is the Big Stories Podcast, where we tell the amazing and inspiring stories from across the Big 12 Conference.
I'm your host, Cleon Wall. Coming up a bit later in the episode, we talk about Kansas State and Utah's basketball programs. Neither has had successful seasons on the court, but a couple of podcasters who cover those squads will pontificate on what they've learned from those teams and how many of the Wildcats and Utes will remain Wildcats and Utes after less than awesome seasons. But let's go over a few of the Big 12's biggest storylines.
The Big Story's 5 biggest storylines. Number 5.
How a basketball team responds to the injury of a star player can tell you a lot about that team. Texas Tech lost potential Big 12 Player of the Year JT Toppin to an ACL injury and also lost to the ASU Sun Devils in the same game. Then they've ripped off 3 straight wins. 2 of those victories were over Kansas State and Cincinnati at home. Yeah, not impressive. But then they went on the road and beat Iowa State. In each of those games, the Red Raiders have shot over 50% from the field, over 40% from the three-point line, and have dished out at least 14 assists in each game. This team is playing team basketball. Christian Anderson may be the star, but he's getting a lot of help.
Number 4.
How a basketball team responds to the injury of a star player can tell you a lot about that team. Okay, you heard that one before, but this time we're talking about BYU. What's happening to them is what we typically see to teams that lose a star. They struggle. Richie Saunders tore his ACL in the first minute against Colorado, and the Cougars really struggled in that game and in the subsequent games. Then again, is the problem that Saunders is not playing? I know he's a good shooter, and he's fearless when he's on the court. He can finish with both hands when going to the basket. But I think BYU's issues stretch back to before the injury. We've kind of talked about it on the podcast before. I don't think their defense is up to snuff. Coming into this week, the Cougars have given up over 85 points a game 7 times in the last 12 games. Did you get that? 7 times in the past 12 games, the Cougars have given up over 85 points a game. 4 of those 7 games, they've allowed at least 90 points. It's hard to make wholesale adjustments at this point of the season. That goes for any team. For the Cougars, becoming better defenders might just come down to better effort.
Number 3.
Do you remember an earlier episode of Big Stories in which we talked about how you should watch out for TCU? Well, coming into this week, the Horned Frogs were one of ESPN bracketologist Joe Lunardi's last 4 teams into the NCAA tournament. They haven't been amazing, but they've been solid and won a bunch of games they were supposed to win and a few they probably shouldn't have won. I would hate to play this team or UCF in the Big 12 Conference Tournament. I don't really think any of them have stars on their squads. They'll just scratch and claw their way to potential victories.
Number 2.
Let's give it up to Iowa State's Milan Momcilovic. He's the Cyclones' all-time leader in three-pointers made. Don't leave him open because he's automatic. He has made over 50% of his three-point attempts this season. As Darth Vader would say, most impressive.
Number 1.
Congrats to the 4 Big 12 teams who are still in the top 25 this week. The lowest-ranked team is Texas Tech at 10. Again, most impressive. We're coming to the end of the basketball season, so we thought we would get a jump start on how some of the teams have fared in the 25-26 season, and we're starting from the bottom and going up. I mean, hey, there is no place to go but up for Kansas State and Utah, right? We will begin with the Wildcats, who need a brand new head coach after firing Jerome Tang earlier this season. Who could take over after the season? That's something I discussed with John Kurtz, who hosts the 3 Ma podcast and the Open for Business Big 12 podcast. But before we got into any of that, my first question to him was how Tang's firing has affected the team on the court and in the locker room.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot going on. It's even beyond just, obviously, you have the transition at head coach, and now Matthew Driscoll is the interim head coach. But beyond that, this team has just had a bunch of different guys in and out of the lineup the entire year. So it just feels like there's been no continuity most of the entire season. Boy, I'm trying to think where to start on the list of, Elias Rapiak. They've had a lot of injuries in the front court. Elias Rapiak and Kamari McGriff, who were the 2 starting bigs for most of the season. I mean, they missed most of conference play. They've just now started to trickle back into the lineup, but that was killer. Abdi Bashir, who's one of the best three-point shooters in the conference, and total one-trick pony. I mean, he doesn't defend, doesn't do much other than snipe threes, but he is a great shooter and was definitely an asset and a weapon. He got hurt early in conference play at Oklahoma State, missed a bunch of times, still hasn't come back at this point in the season. So that obviously has really, really hurt them. Moby Ike Garuga, who was a nice role player last year and probably would have been that again this year, he's missed almost the entire season. So you combine that with all the drama surrounding Jerome Tang, and then here he goes. He's out now. It's Matthew Driscoll. It's just like this team has not been able to find its footing at all. PJ Haggerty is about the only consistency that they have in terms of a guy who's going to be able to go score. Outside of that, there's just not a whole lot you can rely on. I mean, they've had Nate Johnson has played better, it seems like, since Jerome Tang has been gone. I don't know that there's any like direct tie to that, but he was a bright spot in the non-conference and then a real disappointment for most of conference play, and is just now starting to come back around. And when he plays well, they could do things like beat Baylor by 16, which they did obviously in the first game post Jerome Tang. But there's just not really any consistency with this team, this roster, and obviously the staff too.
We're going to get to PJ Haggerty here in a second, but before we do, have you noticed any differences between Jerome Tang and now interim coach Matthew Driscoll?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say because the first game out, it seemed like there was some sort of galvanizing effect with whether it was players playing for Jerome Tang or it was Matthew Driscoll being a bit more organized. I mean, frankly, I feel that Driscoll is a bit more organized and buttoned up as a head coach. He's a guy that, for those unfamiliar, he was a head coach at North Florida for a long time. So, like, he's been a relatively successful mid to low major head coach before, so plenty of experience. And it seemed to me like they were just a bit more in sync, organized, at least for one game against Baylor when they really thumped them. And then they went to Texas Tech, and JT Toppin wasn't playing, and they lost by almost 30, and it just kind of looked like the same old deal. So, you know, Driscoll's MO is he's an offensive guy, and that was kind of the thought when he came in this year. Oh, this is going to really help the offense. High flying, he wants threes and dunks, not much in between, a ton of possessions, like pace, get up and down the floor. It did seem like they've maybe been playing a bit faster. I don't have the analytics in front of me to back that up necessarily, but maybe with Driscoll, he's been able to enforce a bit more of that, kind of his offensive style. But really, in the end, there's almost just like a deck chairs on the Titanic sort of feel to it. You know, I mean, nothing is really making a significant difference, it feels like.
PJ Haggerty has played for 4 teams in 4 seasons. He's dominated the stat sheets when it comes to scoring, which you've talked about, despite the team struggles on the court. What would retaining him for his senior year potentially mean for this Wildcat squad?
Yeah, that'll be a really interesting one because I have no feel for what he's going to want to do. I mean, I think he was kind of, if you think back to Jerome Tang's rant after the Cincinnati game, which is what really sparked everything and was sort of the last straw to get him fired, he was talking about most of these guys aren't going to be here next year. They don't deserve to wear the uniform. They don't have pride in K-State, basically, is what he was saying. I mean, I certainly have never gotten the feel that he's a guy that's particularly committed. And like you said, he's obviously been at a bunch of different schools already in his career, so there's no real track record of that. I'm certainly not counting on it. But what you would get is just you would get scoring. I mean, you get a scorer. Like he is a really crafty, creative scorer. He's not the most athletic guy in the world. He's not a particularly great shooter, but he's really good at just putting his head down and getting to the rim and almost like some like crafty old man game around the rim. Like he's just really, really has some subtle moves and head fakes and hesitation moves. Just he is very creative in how he can get to the basket. And so he would, in a lot of ways, raise at least your offensive floor. But I do think it's fair at this point to question in his career. Like he's not a guy that's been associated with a ton of winning necessarily either. So it'll be interesting to see the next coach and how that goes. And I think a part of the deal is going to be he will command a heavy price because he puts up eye-catching offensive statistics. I'm sure somebody out there will want to get their hands on him and work with him within their system. So I would have my doubts that that there would be a match there in terms of price and what he brings to the table. But he definitely is somebody, if you want to make sure that you're going to be able to score the ball, Like, he's a guy night in, night out, no matter how bad this team has been this year, he's going to get 15 to 20 points.
You mentioned some of the players already that have been like you've seen flashes of good play and then injuries, or they've done good at times and not played good at times. Are any of these players, and I know you just mentioned, by the way, that Jerome Tang said, I don't know if any of these guys are going to be back on the team, but he's not going to be back on the team. Are any of these guys, are you hoping, or are Wildcats fans hoping that any of these guys return, or are we thinking, man, this is going to be a clean slate?
Yeah, a guy that I really like is David Castillo. He's been a program guy, one of the few players that has been around a little bit. He played last year and was not very good at all. In fact, I think most people were hoping that he would be gone. He was a pretty highly recruited freshman, high hopes for him, but had a really, really rough freshman season. And he's had some very high moments. Now, it's been a bit of a roller coaster. He's probably like a 10, 11 point a game guy, but it's been, some nights where he scores 20 and then nights where he's just totally invisible. Been one of those sorts of guys, but hard worker, pretty humble, keeps his head down. He's the type of guy that I think would be really valuable for the program if they can keep him around. But I was impressed that he stuck around after last year. I don't know what's going to be in his head about this year, but that's a guy that I think could be a valuable piece if you want to keep him around. Andre Kostic is another really interesting piece. He's a guy that has been, before the season, there was one NBA mock draft that had him like late in the first round. He's a European kid, but he and Tang just really butted heads from the start. He wasn't playing a whole lot, even though he's got a ton of talent, but he's very young and I think just a little immature, especially from like a basketball sense, and doesn't defend a whole lot, but incredible shooter. He's got a great offensive game, wildly talented. He's the type of guy that, if you got a coach that felt like they could really work with him, I would certainly like to see him stick around and see what the potential is there. But, man, yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of these guys have just been pretty disappointing, and I think it's going to be a pretty total overhaul for the next coach. Could be wrong. But that's kind of my list, at least right now, of what I'm thinking.
I know there are some websites out there that are saying this is who should be, here are the top 3 candidates for Kansas State coach. You can name names if you want, but what kind of a coach do you think that A.D. Gene Taylor needs to bring in so that Kansas State gets to be a team that's competing for championships in the future?
Yeah, I think first things first, he's going to want somebody with head coaching experience, which that's sort of just the natural tendency, right? You hire an offensive guy, the next coach is usually a defensive guy or whatever. So in this case, you hired the longtime assistant. Now I think you're going to get somebody that has head coaching experience, whether it's at the Power 4 level or the mid-major level. I think, names that Jared Calhoun, I think, is somebody that's definitely on the radar. I think there's mutual interest there. It'll be interesting to see what happens if the Cincinnati job comes open. He's a Cincinnati grad, but he was only actually there for 1 year when he was a student assistant under Bob Huggins way back when. But that would be one that I'm sure is intriguing to him too, Jared Calhoun at Utah State. Chris Holtman is another name that I don't know that I'm particularly excited about, but he was at Ohio State for a while. Solid. He made like 4 or 5 straight tournaments and then had 2 really bad years to end it, got fired. He went back to DePaul, which might be like the worst Power 4 job in the country, and he's got them at least to like kind of a middling level in the Big East, which is much better than where they were before. So if you're going the retread route, that's one. I think Chris Mack is another name under the radar that's in that same sort of category that might get some consideration there. That's a short list of I'm forgetting the guy's name at Belmont, the Belmont head coach, who's a Belmont grad. He's been there for a long time. He's in his 50s. He's never been a high major coach, but has had a decent amount of success at Belmont, and they're having a really good year this year. Those are some of the names I'm hearing right now. So I would at least start with that, but I think this will be a long search process, which is, somebody you're just at the mercy of the season, right? Like you fired your coach in mid-February, so you're going to have to wait a while. So it could take some twists and turns and evolve quite a bit, but that's some of the scuttlebutt right now.
John, you not only talk about Kansas State sports, but you also talk about the Big 12. Let all the people out there who are listening, let them know everything that you're doing right now when it comes to Big 12 and Kansas State.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So if you want the K-State specific stuff, I do the 3MAW podcast. That's 3MAW with a couple of guys. You can find that on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. For Big 12 content, I do the Open for Business Big 12 podcast and YouTube channel. Just search Open for Business with John Kurtz, wherever it is you get your podcasts, or on YouTube. And then I have the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter, which is twice a week, totally for free to your inbox. We got over 6,000 Big 12 fans subscribing. You can sign up for that at ofbnews.com. And you can follow me on Twitter, also, JL Kurtz, JLKURTZ.
For your information, Casey Alexander is the name of the Belmont head coach John was trying to remember. Now on to the Utah Utes, who won't be firing head coach Alex Jensen anytime soon. They just hired him last season, and he's a proven coach coming from the professional ranks. His first year was all about building a strong foundation, or as Alex Markham of the Ute Nation Podcast puts it, building a strong culture.
Ideally, there's about 5 to 6 guys that Utah can hopefully keep, and if they do that, there's a good start to the culture next year, where those guys know what they need to do and you know where to take it from here, right? But yeah, I mean you're exactly right. Like, you know, most coaches would be looking for a different job, even if it was their first year, right? Utah knew what they were getting into with Alex on this. There's been some really nice signs during the games. It's just stuff that like comes for brief spurts and it's not sustainable, or you can see the right play being called and it's just not executed because you don't have the right guys out there. You don't have the capable guys out there, right? Like even Terrence Brown, who is a great player, at the start of the year, I told everybody, I was like, look, I like his potential. But at the same time, too, I'm worried about how ball dominant he is and stuff like that, you know, because you look at the assists and they just weren't really there. And, you know, he's had his ebbs and flows of being an actual point guard, right? The other game against Iowa State, that wasn't happening. You know, Utah actually went toe-to-toe pretty well with Iowa State. They just didn't have a point guard, and that's not a knock on Brown. Brown is being put in a role. He's doing a role that he's being asked to do when he's more of a shooting guard, let's be honest, right? And he had 7 turnovers, couldn't handle the pressure, and it went to hell for Utah. You know, but yeah, I mean, it's, again, you know, and I know I'm kind of going a little bit more in depth on it like I always do for you, so I apologize, right? But yeah, it's you know, the majority of Utah fans are extremely excited with the foundation that they can see with Jensen and what he has going on, because they can sit back, see that, and parse through it and understand it. There are some where they're just furious and fed up and sick of it, but like I just challenge those guys, like, you know, pay deeper attention to the game, and you'll understand why there's intrigue and excitement, even though the record is just not there.
You mentioned Terrence Brown, and he has shown the ability to score. He's the team's leading scorer. Yeah, he has some stinkers like a game against Arizona State where he really struggled to shoot, but he's also had good games like against TCU, Kansas State, BYU, to name a few. He's the clear focal point of this offense. Is the hope that A, he sticks around, and B, maybe he moves off being that point guard and you can get him into better opportunities and chances for him to be the kind of player he needs to be successful?
Yeah, you know, there's a couple layers to this, because kind of like I mentioned too, like, yeah, you want Terrence Brown to stick around. You have to pay him a pretty penny next year to keep him around, because, I mean, he is vital, right? Same time too, he is a ball dominant guard. Okay, so even if they bring somebody in as a point guard and move him off the ball, which then he's a little bit of an undersized shooting guard, which he can do. I mean, that is what Terrence Brown is. He is an undersized shooting guard being asked to play point guard. You know, it was almost like how Keontae George was for the Jazz the first couple years, being a fish out of water, being asked to play point guard until it finally clicked for him, right? And I'm not comparing those two. I'm just saying, like, the scenario. And but I don't know that just bringing in a capable point guard that can run the show and steady the ship and everything is going to solve that issue for Brown because he is ball dominant. He is a high volume guard.
When I think back to when Alex Jensen played for the Utes, to me, he was that glue guy. He did a little bit of everything, but the thing that you hated about playing against Alex Jensen, if you played against him, is he was going to play you tough on defense, and he was going to be physical with you. Is he trying to mold this team in his image? And what does he need to do to get the image that he's looking for from this team?
Yeah, I would say to an extent, but at the same time, too, I mean, he was a coach in the NBA for so long and learned so many valuable things that, again, there's an extent, there's portions of it, right? I mean, today's game, would Alex Jensen back then really be able to be a vital piece in today's game? I don't know. I mean, he's going to get in, he's going to do the dirty work, which was his role for the majority of the time up until his senior year at Utah when he had an expanded role. Right. And so, yeah, I mean, there's definitely the toughness factor. There's definitely the defensive factor on trying to mold those guys that way. Somebody that I really think can kind of take that and run with it by staying even another year is Keanu Doss. You know, and there's guys on the team right now that try to embody that, and they're just, you know, they're not cut out for the level, unfortunately, but you can see it. They try, they have their spurts, they have their moments. And so that's also where I talk about, like, when you're watching some of these games and you can see something where the concept was there, right? The coaching was there, just the preparation, everything was there, but, you know, certain players just can't execute it, you know? And so if Utah keeps the foundation with that toughness and that defense, and they can get the guys to buy in and get the right guys for that over the next 1 to 2 years, Utah's going to have a quicker turnaround. They are. Like, the big thing to this, and this is going off your question a little bit, but the big thing to all this is I continuously look back at the fact that, and I know for a fact, Alex freely admits to people that his mistake, even though he doesn't necessarily want to call it a mistake, was staying with the Mavericks towards, you know, throughout the end of last season, right? How different would it have been if he would have been on campus being able to, I mean, he was still going back and forth with Wilcox and Chilius on every single guy, right? But how different would it have been if he actually would have been on campus? I think it would have made a gigantic difference with what would have been on the roster.
Yeah, it's so different now in college basketball. Mm-hmm. Earlier in this podcast, we talked about Kansas State and how they're probably going to have to completely overhaul their team with a brand new head coach. We know that there's not going to be a new head coach at Utah, but what do you think, what kind of a base are you looking for that will carry Utah over into the next season and lead to great things in seasons to come?
Yeah, you know, I mean, just going off the cuff, I'm probably going to forget some guys. But obviously, Terrence Brown and Keanu Dawes are premium when it comes to that. You absolutely have to keep those guys. Lagaritas, even though he played like all of like 4 or 5 minutes against BYU, you could tell that the game came to him different. That was a big blow when he got hurt. He's crucial. You got Jacob, the shooting guard from overseas. He's been hurt most of the year. He's a capable shooter. I mean, like any of these guys that are actually capable shooters that have decent size, you want to keep them around, right? You know, from there, you know, you got the freshmen that weren't expected to play big roles, right? You know, so those guys are obviously important to bring back. You know, Kendall Sanders has been a very pleasant surprise for Utah, and he's done it in a complimentary role. And so, you know, the point guard, Abby, he hasn't done a ton, but at the same time, too, you just wonder what a year of development in Alex Jensen's system could do for him. So there's guys there, right? What Utah needs more than anything, and I know that this is something that they said that they didn't need in the offseason. They said that they didn't really need a true big man for size because of the trends with the conference. And what is it that is absolutely annihilating Utah this year? It's that. Like, some of the guys will, be able to be a little bit physical and stuff like that. But James Okonkwo, good player, gives everybody all that he has. Really positive guy. He's just most Utah teams in the past, he's the third big coming off the bench, and he has to start. And so that's and look, they got the commit recently from overseas that should help them tremendously with that. But it's still, getting a few more of those to go along with that foundation of those other guys that I said that they need to bring back. They do that, and I honestly think it's going to be a positive shift in momentum for the next season.
Okay. Last question I have for you, Alex, and that is, there are very few games left in the season, and then you have the Big 12 tournament. What's kind of your hope over these next few games? What are you hoping to see that will lead into something positive for next season?
It's a good question. Just the continued development of some of the younger guys, as well as, like guys like Keanu Dawes, guys like Terrence Brown, maintaining that professionalism that they've showed and keeping that positive attitude, as opposed to, oh, hey, it's almost done, I can figure this out, and hey, make a bunch of money, going into next season, so I'm done with this, right? So it's just about keeping that positive attitude, as well as, I talked about how if you go and you watch the games, there's spurts where it's like, okay, again, we see what's going on. We see the rhyme and reason. We see why they're doing this, right? And we see why this is going to work. We see why it's not working, right? And it's about taking those spurts, and the spurts that might go for like 3 to 5 minutes and making them go 7 to 10, 10 to 15, an entire half. Can they sustain it throughout an entire game? I don't know that this team can, but it's about taking that and, again, stretching out the sustaining of the positive momentum as much as you can throughout those games. And that's the key thing on this. And dude, I'll tell you this, man, like, I'm excited to finally start covering winning basketball. And I know that Jensen is going to be delivering that. Like, I don't like sitting back and trying to say, like, me saying all these things, it's it's not looking for the small wins or anything like that, right? It's not moral victories. Like, I mean, I've been blunt, like, literally, like, the majority of this team is going to be gone next year. Like, they're not Big 12 caliber, and it's the winning is coming. There's a lot of people that are confident with Jensen.
All right. Well, you host the Ute Nation Podcast. You write for utenation.com. Tell everyone where they can find you or what you've been writing or talking about recently.
Follow me on Twitter, X, whatever everybody wants to call it now, at @Markham _UN for Ute Nation. Ute Nation Podcast. Just go to YouTube and type in Utah Utes at Ute Nation. Catch the stuff with me, Derek Tumiunga, Zach Moss, old BYU and Utah football coach Guy Holiday's on it frequently. A lot of good fun content, So just love interacting with everybody. Always love jumping on this too, Cleon.
A big thanks again to our guests John Kurtz and Alex Markham for joining the podcast today, and Garrett Glauser for producing this episode. Check out this Thursday's episode where we feature former Kansas State women's basketball great Ayoka Lee. She's the Wildcats' all-time leading scorer, but chose not to pursue a professional basketball career. In fact, she doesn't even play pickup basketball. Find out why she's hung up her sneakers and how she's helping K-State athletes become their best selves. I'm Cleon Wall, and Big Stories is a production of BYU Radio.